All right, let's unpack this further then. We're joined via Zoom by Grant Masterson, head of the programs at Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Always a pleasure to see you, Grant. Thank you for availing yourself again to us here at SABC News, sir.
Nice to talk to you, Flo.
Just as a start, I mean, looking at the Constitutional Court's mandate, of course, I understand the IECs to approach the Constitutional Court in a bid to have the elections postponed. When we look at what the mandate of the Constitutional Court is and the fact that, being able to vote and voting on the days that are stipulated is, in fact, in the Constitution itself, what's the likelihood then that the IEC would indeed be successful in this bid to have the elections at a later stage?
We have no idea what the successful chances of this application are. What we do know is that this is Plan A and Plan B for the IEC right now. We know that the application that they are submitting today is both seeking direct access to the Constitutional Court to make sure that they have direct access to the court that they need to have access to, and that it's on an urgent basis. The reality is that while this application is going on, while the IEC is making the argument that it would be better to defer these elections to February next year, plans continue to gather apace for an election in October as well. So we sit here with a situation where we may have an election in October, or we may be allowed to defer it to February if the court so rules. So we are sitting with a dual scenario right now.
I think it's important for us, Grant, to talk about those implications should the elections then indeed be postponed. Certainly logistically, we know what those implications would be for South Africans. But let's talk about in terms of the legal aspects. Legally, what would the implications then be of that?
Well, granting a deferral of the election date would presumably provide the necessary legal cover for the IEC to go ahead and do just that. There were several submissions during the Moseneke hearings that suggested that the IEC was within its rights to request such a deferral, that the Constitutional Court had the scope within its own powers to allow for such a deferral. And I sincerely hope that is the case, because we do need the elections to not only be free and fair, to not only ensure the health and safety of all of our voters and the IEC staff, but we critically have to have that constitutional guarantee that we are abiding by the law, that we are abiding by the Constitution, which governs all processes in South Africa, and especially elections themselves. Yeah,
I mean, you talk about the Moseneke Inquiry and of course the report that came. What would have been the point of this entire inquiry that did take some time? And the last time you and I spoke, you mentioned the fact that you were impressed at the fact that it was quite a thorough report. What would have been the point of having this whole entire inquiry if indeed we are going to see elections happening on the 27th of October, as has been announced by the ConCourt minister, and indeed at this point it is set and gazetted, as the minister said. It is within her responsibility to make sure that a date is set for those elections.
That would be a very unfortunate scenario, because in that case the IEC would have been the author of its own sort of set of problems in essence, because Moseneke has recommended that it is not possible to hold free and fair elections under conditions during which the COVID pandemic is at the state that we find ourselves in right now. So the pronouncement by Moseneke in his report that it's not possible to have free and fair elections would then suggest that if we go ahead in October, that they would not be free and fair. And for the IEC to have adopted a report that says exactly that, and then because we don't have any other legal recourse to go ahead and to have the elections regardless of that statement, would raise a lot of questions. And I think quite legitimately those who have a problem perhaps with the outcome of the election might use the IEC's own report to suggest that the elections were not free and fair. So that would be a very, very unfortunate outcome. Yeah. That's why I say that it's essential that the constitutional guarantees are put in place to allow for the deferral to take place.
Yeah. The date set as what is hoped to be the deferral date, which is around the end of February, that if you look at what the date should be, the 27th of October, that's about a 4-month gap. We don't know where we'll be in that 4 months. Things could be worse off in terms of the spread of coronavirus. We might be dealing with a whole different variant at that time, and one wonders what is the point point of this 4 months? Why was it put as a 4 months delay? I mean, one wonders if, we reach February, let's say the end of February does come, the elections have indeed been postponed to the end of February, and we find ourselves in a situation where we're dealing with, worse than what we're dealing with currently. We've now set a precedent that elections can then be postponed as and when. And one then wonders what would then happen come the end of February, and we find ourselves in that worse off situation. Will we then see a situation where we can again postpone those elections? I'm just trying to see, where we would be if we were to postpone those elections.
That's right, and this is the real fly in the ointment, is that once you've deferred an election once you've requested it once, then you really start to ask yourself, when are the idealized conditions? Because you can always imagine a scenario in which there are more ideal conditions under which an election can be held. And the reality is that no election is ever perfect. There is no election that ticks every single box. It's always a balancing act between a sum of variables, and you have to work out, is this sufficient to meet the constitutional requirement for free and fair elections? And I think that the critical element here is that Moseneke applied his mind very carefully about when the elections should be deferred to. And he put in there two key reasons. One was that we would be able to be further along in our vaccination drive as a country, that we would have more people vaccinated, and that this was an important period of time to really push as many vaccinations as possible amongst South Africa's voters. And so that was part of it. And then the other consideration was he did not want the election date to be so late as to run into the new budget year for local government elections themselves. Yeah. So those two kind of set the parameters within which the election date could be set.
All right, Grant, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for giving us your time, as always.